good friend and a legend, in at least for me, a guy that is just one of the straightest arrows you will ever meet. He is now the executive vice president of the Family Research Council, who, of course, we know, thanks to the Southern Poverty Law Center, is a terrorist organization. Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin. Hi, Jerry. How are you, sir?
I'm well, Glenn. It's good to be with you.
Good to talk to you again. Let's just start with your opening thoughts on Afghanistan and how this has gone.
Tragic. It's reminiscent of Saigon, 1975.
I don't mean to interrupt, General, but Saigon, everybody's comparing it to that, but no one was hanging on to the helicopters and then falling to their deaths in Saigon when we left.
Well, clearly you are correct. In fact, the people in Saigon had close to 2 months to prepare for what ultimately unfolded there on, I think, about the 15th of April. So you're right. I say it is reminiscent of Saigon. We haven't seen that kind of thing. It marks a number of things. First of all, it marks the end of this war that America has lost. And that is a hard thing for me to say, but we have lost here. And we need to accept that and understand that. And we need to understand that there's plenty of blame and criticism to go around, going all the way back to the Bush administration here, because we really fouled this thing up when we took our eye off the ball. After we'd completed our objectives there, with the exception of capturing or killing bin Laden, we then turned everything over to NATO, and NATO will not fight. That's just a simple thing. I mean, all you have to do is talk to people that have been in different situations, and I'm one of those people, where NATO has been on the ground, NATO's been responsible, and the NATO countries do not fight. They come with national caveats that prevent them from fighting. So what we did is we lost our focus, turned to Iraq, and left it in the hands of NATO. We should have pulled out probably in January of 2002 because we had achieved our objectives. And then we got into nation building, and when we got into nation building and we turned it over to NATO, we just took our eye off the ball. And now we see the results of that. And I am very saddened by it. This is worse than what happened in Saigon. You're right. But it is reminiscent for a generation that was not here during that period.
We are on the edge of losing our superpower status, are we not? I mean, Russia and China's mocking us right now with Taiwan. And I think they're right.
Well, I think they're right, too. And that may be the biggest loss in this whole thing. It may not be just the loss of the war. It may be the loss of our credibility as an ally. Listen, don't think for 1 minute that China and Russia are not licking their lips. And at the same time, Taiwan and the Ukraine are very, very worried because we have demonstrated just how reliable we are not. When it comes down to it.
I have never in my lifetime seen our allies come out as they have. I mean, some of our allies didn't like Donald Trump, and they would make, remarks here and there, but not like this. Our allies now, all over the NATO nations, they're all saying the same thing. What does this mean? We can't trust that America is going to have our back anymore. I mean, we betrayed all of those people that went in with us. Did we not?
We did indeed. And remember, we had a NATO coalition there, which I was talking about earlier when we just finally turned everything over to them and we went to Iraq. We had a NATO coalition there, and by NATO charter, an attack on one is an attack on all, and those nations were obliged to pony up troops to go into Afghanistan and fight with us there in Afghanistan. And again, I'll come back and tell you that my experience with them in the Balkans and in other places is the NATO countries come with caveats from their own government that tells them exactly what their rules of engagement are, and they're never consistent with the rules of engagement that are established to be able to win in the environment, and that's what we turned it over to, people who would not fight, and that was a huge mistake. But there's plenty of blame to go around, to include going all the way back to the Bush administration when they did lose their focus and they pulled everything out and went to Iraq, just as we were actually achieving our objectives there in Afghanistan. With the exception of bin Laden. We could have pulled out of there in January and have left behind the right small forces to include intelligence capabilities, a counterterror operation, some trainers, advisors, and then finally some people to secure the embassy there. We could have left them all behind in a very small element and sustained that for an indefinite period of time. But more in an advisory and counterterror role than anything else, and we didn't.
How?
We stayed there in major forces until finally a bad decision was made by the Obama administration to tell them what we were going to do, and then turn around and pull out precipitously before even the Iraqis were prepared. So.
Can you help me out on why we would build a $1 billion embassy and a gigantic Air Force base with all kinds of strategic capabilities and advantages, and then just walk away with it, including some drones and some Blackhawks and everything else? Why would we do that?
Yeah, I will tell you that my assessment is, and I hope this doesn't sound like sour grapes, but I think we got in the Obama administration, that we got some really bad leadership into our military at all levels and all services. We got some bad leadership there, and then we also got some very bad leadership over in the State Department. And I think that the combination of what started under the Bush administration, there were some bad ones in the Bush administration, but that just increased during the Obama administration, and actually Trump was about to clean it up when he left. But don't forget, Trump did actually say that he was going to be out of there by May. The difference is that Donald Trump was flexible enough to see what was going on, to listen to his advisors, those that he knew that he could trust in terms of how to deal with what was going on. And I think he would have taken a step back and have probably developed a different timeline for this, and he would have responded when he saw the Taliban was going to do what they were doing. I think he would have gone in there with some pretty heavy firepower and fought that back.
So we have left all kinds of people behind. We have left all kinds of military equipment behind that they now have. It is obscene. And Biden, while he said yesterday, buck stops here, he blamed it on everybody, including the Afghan people who he said will not fight, but they have lost 69,000 people in this fight. That's more than we lost in Vietnam, and they are not the size of America during the Vietnam years by any stretch of the imagination. Is it that they wouldn't fight? Is it that we wouldn't provide air cover? What happened?
Yeah, listen, we need to understand that what makes America's soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines fight the way they do, and they've done a good job, is they take an allegiance to a Constitution that means something to them, to a Constitution that goes back, to the very beginnings of this nation, and that alone helps to bring about a camaraderie that puts them in a situation where they're fighting for a nation. They're fighting for their families. They're fighting for the future of their children and their grandchildren. You go back and look at the Taliban, or not the Taliban, but the Afghans. They're a tribal society.
Right.
Their allegiance is to the local tribal chief. And when you try to make a country out of them, and by the way, Glenn, they started out writing a constitution for the Afghans. They started it with the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Well, that ought to tell you something right there, that we don't know what we're doing, and that for them, what that's saying is, therefore, Sharia will be the law of the land. And we are to blame for that kind of nonsense. But they don't fight because the Taliban is actually organized and motivated by an ideology, a theology that they believe in very much as to what their responsibilities are under the banner of Islam, and they're motivated by that. But the army that we trained and left behind there, the Afghan National Forces, they're still tribal. Their allegiance is still to the tribe, and they're not fighting for
the country
that doesn't exist.
Right. So, whose failure is this? Is it the intelligence? Is it the Pentagon? Or did they tell the president everything he needed to know? I mean, he's making it sound like, no, that's not what they said. They didn't say that this would fall apart. And
listen, Glenn, I know, Scotty Miller very, very well. Scotty was one of my Delta Force guys. And I know that Scotty Miller gave him advice not to do what he was doing. And others gave him the same advice. The problem is he's got these Harvard and Yale and all these graduates from some of these finest Ivy League universities that are part of his cabinet, part of his advisory team, part of his national security element there. And they have not a clue what Afghanistan or any other country like that is, how it's composed, of the tribal nature and structure. They have no idea, and they are giving him bad advice at the same time that some of his generals are trying to tell him, wait a minute, slow down, back up, let's do this right. And he has ignored that. He's blown that off because his advisors, like his Secretary of Defense and his Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, have been sycophants as far as I am concerned, and they have nodded and said, yes, this will work, Mr. President. And then, you look at the doggone Chairman of the Joint Chiefs when he was testifying before the Armed Services Committee, and he's talking about white rage, and he's talking about what makes people go to the Capitol and breach the Capitol. That has nothing to do with the military, nothing. In 36 and a half years, I never saw white rage. By statute, General Milley is supposed to be the advisor to the president on all things military. Breaching that Capitol had nothing to do with the military, so why are you spending your time, instead of thinking about the readiness of our military? And white rage, as far as I'm concerned, it is a non-issue for the military. So he needs some new leadership in the Pentagon.
Well, they're not coming. They all felt that they did a great job. Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, thank you so much, sir, for all of your service, and best of luck at the Family Research Council. Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin. Find him at frc.org.